Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the wrap up with myself, Jamie Talks, here on the West Ham Network. Sorry, I am a couple of minutes late. I have been violently unwell for the last day or so, and I completely missed the time. Good to have you guys back. Let's get some questions in here straight away. Just put this in here. Right, I'm in. How are you all doing, guys? Welcome back. As I said, this is the wrap up with myself, Jamie Talks. This week, we're going to be doing a lot of talking up the next game against Newcastle for sure. Big game this weekend. Top half of the table kind of clash. Last time we played each other, it was obviously a draw 2-2 in the league. It was a tough fought game on that day. I remember Mo Kadu scored a really good goal in the bottom corner. And I think we led that. We were leading in that game 1-0, and then we came back to draw 2-2. So it was a great game for the neutral. How's everyone doing though, guys? How are we all feeling without Premier League football to have on the weekend? I'm very excited for it to be back. I don't know about you guys, but watching the England internationals is very hard to get out of bed for England outside of an international tournament, of course. But even then, I mean, last weekend when it was West Ham, what we're talking about, when it was England versus Brazil, the highest amount of praise and pride I had towards a footballer on the pitch was Lucas Paquetá. So one thing I want to actually ask you guys is, are you club or country? That's the one I want to know first and foremost. So yeah, I mean, I think back to, it's just to start off the stream, that I think back to last weekend, of course, when it was Lucas Paquetá playing against West Ham, performing at the highest possible level as well. Arguably one of the better players on the pitch, and I see him doing things with the football there, and I'm more impressed and kind of like full of pride and for that kind of thing than I am with any of the English players. And I think that boils down to the fact that I am 100% a club man over country. I think when we talk about lowest points in football and stuff like that, I remember the first time I ever cried over football was the FA Cup final against Liverpool many, many, many years ago, when Steven Gerrard obviously did what Steven Gerrard did. And there's some of the low points of football. It was the first time I ever cried over football. And then when I compare and contrast moments like that to England losing in the Euros, of course at the time I was gutted, but they just don't compare. So I do think I am very much a club guy. I'm a club man. But I'd be interested to see what you guys think, of course, as well. Are you club or country? Do you think you get more pride and more excitement out on watching West Ham play on the weekend, or is it all about England? Let me know. Going into the game this weekend, of course, then. So Newcastle are a tough side, of course. They've had a difficult season, really up and down season for sure. They've had a lot of things thrown at them that they wouldn't have expected at the start of the season, of course, whether that was the Tonali kind of banning, or all sorts of players being injured for extended periods of time. I know that this weekend they are without a few important players as well. So it'd be interesting to see if West Ham can kind of capitalize on that. From a West Ham point of view, I feel quietly confident. I don't know how you guys are feeling going into the game. I feel like we can definitely do something there, because I know they haven't got Sven Botman at the back, and obviously he's probably their most important defender this year. Kieran Trippier, as good as he is, he's been making mistakes here and there quite a lot, and they haven't looked solid. So I do think we can actually do a job. Any game at St James's Park, I don't know if anyone in here has been to St James's Park before. It's an absolute cathedral for football. It's arguably one of my favourite grounds that I've ever been to in my life. And whenever you play football there, you just don't know what the result's going to be, of course. So I'm not confident enough to say we're going to win comfortably or whatnot, but I do think we can get a result. I think it'll be, if anything, I'm going for a score draw or a narrow win. And the irony is, I think that can go to either team. I really do. I think, if Newcastle won that game 2-1, or if West Ham won the game 2-1, I don't think anyone would be particularly surprised, because I feel like both teams are or this season anyway, kind of somewhat similarly matched. And I feel like we'll be at full strength pretty much. And Newcastle are missing a lot of key players. So it'll be interesting to see what the international break has done for the form of both sides, because Newcastle have been very, very up and down. West Ham, like ourselves, we've been very down and then very up and then somewhat in the middle a little bit. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see that if the couple of weeks off has given any of the players kind of some time to, recharge their batteries and whatnot. The players that weren't on international duty, that is. Obviously, we saw Jarrod Bowen play for England last night. So yeah. Let's have a look at this then. Right, West Ham, Newcastle. Let's have a tiny thing. Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm with you guys. So it looks like a lot of people in the chat are saying club 100%. So John's saying it all with "Come on, you Irons." Peter Chelmsford coming in with club 100%. Steve Cox coming in with club first. Pete coming in with a score prediction, saying 3-1 to the Geordies. So you're thinking we're going to lose this one? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised with that. I really wouldn't. But I think we're we're well matched, and I think that they're missing more than what we'll be missing. I haven't really seen too much about West Ham going to be missing loads of players. Squad. Let's have a look. But one thing that will be interested is obviously we've had a lot of players going out. Over the international break, which has obviously resulted in players playing all over the world. Obviously, we had Lucas Paquetá playing, Jarrod Bowen amongst the, just to name a few, of course. So it'll be interesting to see how they come back into the side, and if they're kind of fit, for example. As far as I'm aware, we are going into this team fully strengthened. It will just be dependent on how much the time the players have had to recover, kind of thing. So, Pete, feel free to leave it in the chat, my friend. I haven't seen anything so far. Who are we set to be missing for the game? Because I've seen that Newcastle are missing a lot of players like Lewis Miley, Trippier, Joelinton, for example. Sven Botman, I know, is definitely out. Like, all those players are kind of like, are arguably in their starting lineup. So it'll be interesting to see what they line up with. But from a West Ham perspective, I'm fairly sure we're at a full strength side. Yeah, let me have a look at this. Let me just look up.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, my laptop's talking to me. Here we go. So, right. Yeah, so just looking at some of the news surrounding the game, it definitely looks like Eddie Howe and Newcastle are going to be dealing with a lot more injuries than what we're going to be having. I haven't seen anything too much around that. Oh yeah, of course, Alvarez. Of course, I know he'll be out due to suspension, isn't it? But from a West Ham perspective, yeah. So look, I'm just reading now. Yeah, Mo Kudus carrying a knock, but should be fine to play. Maxwell Cornet also set to be fine. Whether he'll get any minutes, that's another thing entirely. Lucas Paquetá obviously started both games for Brazil this weekend during the international break. So it'll be whether David Moyes wants to play him. But absolutely, he's our most important player. So we probably want to see him getting some sort of game time on the weekend, especially away at a club like Newcastle. So yeah, I haven't really seen any other players that are injured. Thankfully, I don't want to ruin anything or like kind of tempt fate or whatnot. But it seems like we're okay. It seems like we're all right. Yeah, right. So got a few more answers in here. Usual suspect coming in for club, 100%. I couldn't agree more with you guys. Very much, I'm a club over country man. I think that the easiest way for me to tell is, as I said, for anyone that's just joined the stream or whatnot, I think the highest points in my life have all come from a club kind of. I mean, the highest, let's just say the highest moments in supporting a football club or whatnot. So they've all come as a result of West Ham. And I think also the lower moment, the lowest have always come from a West Ham perspective. I think being relegated for in the Premier League, for example, or losing the FA Cup final. As I said earlier in the stream, that was kind of the first time I ever cried at a football game. It was the first time I ever had such strong emotions over a sport that I'm bawling my eyes out as a kid. Whilst my mum, bless her, who was a Liverpool fan, is 3 feet away from me in the living room, kind of like screaming her head off, loving her life kind of thing. Whereas me and my dad are obviously the very opposite. So, yeah, like when I think about the lowest moments in football, they've always come as a result of West Ham, and the feelings and emotions that kind of West Ham invokes in me as a supporter are so much larger than anything like country would ever provide. I feel like the best thing about like England is like, obviously it's, and everyone's going to say it's this low hanging fruit. Of course, it's very hard to get out of bed for England outside of an international tournament. But then I think the real kind of positivity around like England when they're in a major tournament is that even people that aren't necessarily the biggest football fans all get involved in the supporting of the team. So it's very much like that camaraderie. It almost feels like a nation's going in the right direction, like, one direction. When you think about that Euros kind of run, for example, all the controversies aside, like, fans storming the final and all sorts of things like that. But like the emotions and kind of like the narrative that was kind of like going around the team at that point, it was very like, it was interesting. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it's what we all experience on a club kind of basis, but we never really get to see it on a country kind of thing. I like, some of my best friends, I live in London. Some of my best friends are from all over the world, and they're Colombian, they're Brazilian, they're Spanish. They have such a different kind of, approach to their national sides, which is just like there is much more passion, and it's interesting to say the least. But for me, I think I'm always going to be a club man, 100%. Like the pride that I feel from seeing like a West Ham performance getting a big win is so much more than watching England beat someone. Last night, the only real kind of like excitement that I got throughout the game, and of course, I'm talking from a perspective of like, let's ignore the way that England played last night. It wasn't the best performance in the world. It wasn't the worst. Like, we did what we could, and blah 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 blah. Whatnot. People are going to obviously talk about Southgate, like they'll talk about David Moyes, because they're both very, very pragmatic. But I think that the biggest excitement that I got from the full 90 minutes was Jared Bowen scoring a goal, which was unfortunately chalked off. And that was like the only really moment in the game where I was just like, yes. Even when Jude Bellingham scored in the last minutes, I was like, yeah, great. Jude Bellingham, clearly a generational talent on his way to becoming a world-class player, if he's not there already. So yeah, like I think it's an interesting one in that perspective, because you just don't get that kind of like raw passion and raw kind of emotion that comes from a country side of things. But then if England are in the Euros this summer and I see kind of us get to the semis, us to the quarters or whatnot, and it's like you can go anywhere in the country, and like everyone seems to be wearing an England shirt, every pub garden is full of people watching the football. I think that's when you kind of do get the emotion. But throwaway friendlies in the middle of March, if anything, all they do for me is really just hold up the Premier League season when it's getting really, really juicy. And I feel for so many of the big sides at the moment, because West Ham aren't in a title race, and it seems, fingers crossed, that after this international break, kind of West Ham have avoided a lot of big injuries. But you look at the teams around us, so many players are like declaring themselves injured before the games even start, or players are playing and then they get injured, and now they're out of like the side, like their side's most important kind of time of the season. So like John Stones, for example, and Kyle Walker both played for England. They're now kind of have somewhat like slight niggles or injuries. I don't think they've been fully kind of publicized what those actual injuries are, but they're huge losses to Man City. And I see that as like, a kind of like tarnishing the quality of the Premier League over kind of just some throwaway game in the international break. And it doesn't make sense to me, because obviously there are some big games that have happened, like look at Wales and Poland last night, obviously going to penalties, and the winner of that game gets the Euro spot. So I understand that, and I get why they're playing games, but I just don't know why England have to play two throwaway friendly games. Saying that though, and tell me if I'm wrong, guys. Like, who watched the England-Brazil game last week? It wasn't a good watch, don't get me wrong, but very much like last night, the excitement I had from that football game was watching Lucas Paquetá do what Lucas Paquetá does. And do you know what? It felt like the rest of the footballing world was catching up to what we see on an everyday basis. And it's very similar to what we used to see with Dimitri Payet years ago. I'm sure you can all remember when Dimitri Payet was obviously at West Ham. He was a plucky little West Ham, performing really, really high, but no one was really paying too much attention. Then he goes to the Euros with France, scores an absolute banger, injures Cristiano Ronaldo in the final and all sorts of things like that, puts himself up there as arguably one of the best players in the world. Some people would say that, of course. And then, I think it's similar to we see Lucas Paquetá just doing incredible things. Lucas Paquetá dinking a ball over to Vinicius Jr. We see him make passes for Brazil last week that he makes to Jarrett Bowen every week. And it's just oh, yes, it's great. Do you know what I mean? It gets me going. Do you know what I'm saying? But that's a Brazilian player. And I'm more excited by that than I am about watching, I don't know, insert name here in the England side. I really am. It was maybe a little bit different when Declan Rice was obviously a bigger part. And I thought Declan Rice was obviously one of the first names on the team sheet, and he was obviously at West Ham. And maybe I felt a little bit more kind of passion for the national side. But now it's kind of just it's like a separate football team in a way. And it's just I don't know if I support them as much. It's just a very strange concept. I don't know. Very, very strange. But yeah, I think you're right, mate. Bowen did do well. I think the crazy thing is when you look at that England side last night, there's players that haven't even made the squad that are top quality. Players like Ruben Loftus-Cheek, for example, who's having a top season for AC Milan, playing Champions League football and whatnot. Now in the Europa League, of course. So we could end up playing him this year, but he hasn't even got a shout for getting into the side. And I think some of the players that haven't even got minutes in these last two games, are having stellar seasons as well. Cole Palmer didn't even get a minute. It's I do wonder, does Jarrett Bowen make the plane for the Euros? I'm not sure. I hope he does. I really, really do hope he does, because I think, performed well last night. And, seeing him link up with Jude Bellingham is that's kind of, it's like what I was saying a minute ago about Lucas Paquetá and Vinicius Jr. When you see these genuine quality players playing football together, and it's you have a genuine connection to one of those players. That's the only time I ever really get excited about English football on a national perspective. So, yeah, Bowen did do well, mate. Bowen did do well. Right, let's go. That's enough about that, because that was a bit of a rant by me there, guys. Here we go. Right. What are we? Let me stick something in the chat now. So if you can all react to this, I'd appreciate it. Do you know what? Before I do that, it was funny seeing Paquetá doing shithousery against us. Mate, he's actually different gravy. They're so good. He is so good. Yeah, agreed, Steve. Never want to see injuries, of course. Right, let's bring it back to the Premier League, because thankfully the Premier League is back this weekend, and I couldn't be more excited about it. You guys clearly know my thoughts on international football at the moment, but when we have these international breaks, I'm like a lost puppy on the weekend. So I'm so excited to see the football back this weekend. All right, let's do some score predictions. Okay. Right, here we go. Yeah, apologies, guys. My brain is working at the slowest possible capacity today. I've been battling the flu for about 2 days. So this is going to be a short stream tonight. I'm only going to do about half an hour. But as you can see, I am ill. But as I said, buzzing for the football will be back this weekend. Club football, that is. It's a big game. As I said, going into this Newcastle game, it's one of those stadiums you don't really like going to and playing, because it's such an intimidating atmosphere. I was fortunate enough to go to the game this year with TNT. Sorry, what am I talking about? I was fortunate enough to go to the PSG Newcastle game at St James's Park, where they won 5-1. And yeah, that was one of the best atmospheres I've ever been in my life. Obviously, they won 5-1 in the game. It was like their first game, I think, at St James's Park in the best part of 20 years for Champions League football, and it was just such a good atmosphere. So it's one of those kind of stadiums you don't really like going to as a rival fan. Obviously, it's an incredible environment, but it's very much an intimidating place. It's so far away; it almost feels like another country as well. So I don't know. Right, Cockney Buccaneer says, my prediction is they spend more Arab money trying to win than we do. We don't have any Arab money, of course. But yeah, I don't, when you take, when we start trying to put morals on football and things like that, I always find it super difficult because kind of dirty money has been in football for the best, for years and years and years and years and years. The scale of it has just obviously grown. And I don't necessarily resent Newcastle kind of getting a few happy away days and a few moments to kind of cherish because they went through it. They went through it with Mike Ashley. You can say he obviously ran the club financially well and everything like that, and then kind of set them up well for these, the Arab owners to come over and take over and obviously kind of like build on that. But like they went through a hell of a long shocking period with Mike Ashley, so it's good to see him getting to cup finals and getting to play Champions League football and going away to the Parc des Princes and playing PSG and whatnot. So yeah, I'm feeling quietly confident for this weekend. I think, I love a Saturday game. I really do. I feel like we're kind of operating at full strength, other than like a few players here and there being sorry, I'm just reading your comments at the same time. Been there many times, including the petrol bomb attack in the 70s. Newcastle were changing their run-up tune to... They are failing a bit recently, so a draw. Yeah, I think for me, it's either going to be a score draw, like a 1-1, and hopefully there won't be too much ring rust from either sides. We're obviously talking about the players that West Ham have had on international duty coming back and hoping that they don't have too many they're too tired or whatnot, or not operating at the full capacity. But it'll be very much the same kind of thing for Newcastle. Obviously, they've had Bruno Guimaraes playing for Brazil. They've had Anthony Gordon playing for England. They've probably had a bunch of other players as well, but off the top of my head, I can't think of them. Maybe Isak. I think Isak went away with Sweden as well. So they've got a bunch of players obviously coming back from the international break, as West Ham do as well. And I think we're operating at more of a full strength capacity than what they are. And I feel that we can get a result. I think it will be a tight game either way. I feel like both sides generally are quite well matched in terms of, how they line up. The style of football is obviously different, but I do feel like we're very similar in that kind of like ability capacity. So for me, I would go with a narrow win. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a 2-1. But then again, at the same time, a narrow draw could be a narrow draw. Don't even make sense. A score draw could make sense as well. So like a 1-1 or a 2-2. But I'm going to go out there and say 2-1 for me. Right. Usual suspect coming in. Boring result, mate. Boring result. 0-0. Ball draw. Steve coming in with a 2-2. Lots of score draws in here. Let's just go through the chat, see if anyone else. Pete, going back earlier in the chat, was 3-1. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, guys. Very, very interesting to see that. Now, I'm going to start wrapping things up in a moment because, as I said, I feel like I'm at death's door. But yeah, guys, super excited for the football to come back this weekend. I've one of missed football, especially West Ham, seeing them on the weekend. So I'm excited for them to come back. And obviously, we've got a big game next Tuesday as well against Tottenham. So I'm excited for that one. Excited for that one indeed. Right, guys. So as I said, this has been the wrap up. Super short one this week. Apologies for that. I'll be back next Wednesday at 9 p.m. And yeah, can't wait for it. Hope you're all well, guys. Catch you all on the weekend. And yeah, catch me next week. Nice one.